So yeah, now it's the same question before your respective organizations, basically the origin story of those and yeah, how they're formed and what part in nightlife culture in your community they play.
So Community Bread spawned in March of last year as a necessity because none of our friends, none of our mentors, none of the artists that we love had work. Everyone was forced to stay home, battle their own inner demons, and we realized that this is the first time in global history where everyone is so isolated, like forcefully isolated, and we didn't know what would ever come from it. So I figured, let's create something. I mean, how do we connect with our communities, given this time period? The only way is to do it in a digital format right now because we can't get together. So I partnered up with an old friend of mine who we used to throw parties 7 years ago, Angela Fan. She did the tech for the platform, so she built out the website and figured out all of that stuff. And the idea was we would not just connect communities and audiences with marginalized artists, but we would figure out ways to, provide economic support in the midst of the pandemic. So over the past almost 2 years, 1.5 years, we've raised over $30,000 for marginalized artists, not just marginalized artists, but also organizations like the Trans Women of Color Collective, Orem that deals with LGBT refugees. So our initiatives aren't just based on the underground music scene. They go beyond that, and we also strive to have conversations, important conversations, especially those that we maybe in the back corner of a club for 10 minutes over the loud music, But these conversations about the different social injustices that are happening, the movements, and what can we do in our local communities, like those conversations came to the forefront with the Community Bread platform. And we always started off our streams with that, with like Kevin Aviance, Andrew Thomas Huang, all these like really, important figures that really transformed this idea of queer within their own communities and cultures. And we were bringing, we were having those conversations digitally. Oh, and then Paul, of course, joined us as the creative director who really solidified the entire imagery and branding of Community Bread. And without Paul and Angela, I couldn't, it wouldn't be what it is today.
Thanks so much. That's awesome.
Paul can speak more.
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. But I don't really have much more to add apart from, like Arthur said, we just, when we were isolated, we wanted to come up with kind of left field solutions to how we can help this community that we cherish so much, that, really solidified like our friendship groups and we made so much connections on the dance floor. So yeah, it was really a left field solution to how to help, our marginalized artists in the community. And also, we saw like the whitewashing of techno and, the co-opting of queer spaces first and foremost. And so we thought, well, now that there is no scene or community, what can we can kind of start from ground zero and rebuild something from scratch. But yeah, that's kind of all I have to add on to what Arthur said.
Cool.
So yeah, I'm connected with Rollins, Electronic, independently run festival / blog. But it's interested on kind of centering and showcasing Black perspectives and experiences, whether that's through writing, which isn't where it started before. Actually started kind of before me, again with Frankie Hutchinson, maybe in 2018 or 2019. He also co-runs this singing, about the singing like some artists, booking them, like some of the shows, PR, all of that. No. Well, for the moment, I'll just speak loudly until I get that fixed. Can you guys still hear me? Can everyone still hear me?
I think it's better now that you're leaning forward.
Okay.
So.
Perfect. And so, yeah, the initial impetus was similar to this women, where, and it's what Paul was just speaking to earlier, this idea of you just look at a lineup, you look at a festival lineup, you're getting booked. So around the world, not even just in New York City, and it's extremely white. And so instead of, buying or complaining towards the systems and structures, I guess we're just interested in beginning our own, trying to figure it out in ourselves and for ourselves. And yeah, just trying to be, much more intentional, because something on the dance floor, people can often talk about decolonializing the dance floor, but then like what work is actually being done, that people are like really thinking about that in the moment. And so even the one that I wasn't a part of, we tried to start with a talk, like who this company belongs to, and have these conversations in a room before, this sort of sociality of dancing kind of happens, to kind of provide context to the space before it just kind of becomes, euphoria, which is great, don't get me wrong. But yeah, just trying to, it's being here, like how we navigate really just by through intentionality of, Black people in front and behind the deck.
Yeah, that's amazing. And especially in terms of the way you describe the systems of both the, queer spaces and also just Black spaces. I think in general, when you create something, like create your own, in terms of the organizations or even structures for streaming or even just money and mutual aid, how do you feel that pace is involved in the work that you do? Do you think that some of the ways that you work even now is sustainable, or and this is like a smaller question to a bigger question that I'll get to, but how do you feel like your work within your own space feels to you as an organizer and also as a person who enjoys nightlife? And yeah, and I guess you can explain from there, and anyone can jump in starting.
I guess I'll just chime in. We'll kind of maybe go backwards, but I don't know. I would say, I think, and I'm interested in what Arthur and Paul to say, so community bred, that, when we are kind of working without some sort of oversight than, a much larger kind of conglomerate, some kind of stakeholder, some kind of investor, that's really prompting you to, make sure you have a festival once a year or twice a year. Even for ourselves, again, we kind of publish a blog where we, give submission and kind of redistributing resources and materials to Black writers or poets or artists or anything like that. It's completely on our scale, and I think we're just interested in a scale that feels feasible. So maybe one over the summer, we tried to come up with, we did a reunion, a Joy reunion of like 2.5, and we were also putting out maybe 2 pieces every 2 weeks, or a piece every week. And then August kind of came in, and summer was over, we slowed back down to once a month. And so, yeah, if we were working with a much larger kind of, board of directors and kind of oversight, none of that could have happened. We decided to do the reunion when that was not our usual pattern. And now we decided to slow things down because things are getting really hectic. And so, yeah, it's just whoever's a part of it, we just try to show care in real time and not like, this is the plans, you have to stick to it, not to just be miserable for the sake of something that we built and now we no longer control. So I guess we just operate by communicating and just checking in.
Yeah. And how about the folks from Community Bread?
I was going to say, that's why I love Dweller so much, because, it takes like kind of platforms and festivals and collectives like Dweller to kind of start making the changes. And also like, you kind of work at the pace in which the community feels comfortable. But I think the first and foremost, you kind of have to create and inform, and build some awareness about what they're listening to and what they're dancing to. A lot of my friends don't even know that techno, came from Black artists in Detroit, and house music was like born from, again, Black artists from queer warehouses in Chicago, New York. So I think just even collective like Dweller and what we're trying to do with Community Bread, just telling the stories and then shining a light on the voice that's also integral in building these communities is a good first step. And then, yeah, whatever the pace is that our scene feels comfortable. I mean, for me, it feels urgent, but at the same time, you kind of have to work with what everyone feels comfortable with.
I kind of want to respond to that, if that's okay, Arthur. Yeah, so from what you were saying, it made me start to think about, trying to provide, I think I said earlier, trying to provide context to the dance floor. And I was writing these things down earlier where I think, and this might be a case of where like the digital realm has gotten us. I think it's like streaming services, like, the world is a playlist now and it's all about like specifying a certain mood, but when you're listening to certain things, it can just flow into this very ambiguous sound. I think that can also happen a lot if you're going to a club or something, where you're not actually thinking about the labor or the material, even the memory that some of those sounds might be connected to. And now, things like Spotify, like there are no liner notes. There's no, like, not that I'm like harping on physicality too much, but when you hold certain things, you understand that there's a certain labor connected to it. And I think so much right now is like really hard, really focused on mood, but I think that Dollar really focused on memory and trying to apply memory instead of this kind of mood of a feeling. It's like one of that feeling connected to like a lot of suffering and a lot of struggle, and which can also lead to catharsis and connectivity and sociality. If you're just worried about like making sure the vibe is right, you're leaving so much on the cutting room floor. And I think that's a memory. Anyway, you made me think about that type of concept.
No, that was amazing.
Yeah, especially connection to memory. But yeah, you can go, Arthur. Sorry.
Yeah, I think that building on what everyone said, I think that pacing is very interesting. Is a very interesting question to ask, especially because we came to the screeching halt in so many industries as the result of a pandemic, and now we're full throttle trying to make up for money, lost time. I think that there is importance in taking a step back and realizing what we went through, what we fought for, and, what we sacrificed and what we did in that period in order to understand how we're going to move forward. Because I think that because before the pandemic, nightlife was not in a good state at all. And now we have the opportunity to rebuild it. And let's not forget that, because I can already see it transforming back into the way it was, and this is our only opportunity to do this. So I think it's such a critical time in not just the music industry, but in our local communities. And we have to be having the conversations. We have to be engaging in the right initiatives, for inclusion, accessibility, pay, and putting people in roles of power.
Yeah, and I think going off of the roles of power and also this idea of pace, in larger organizations or structures who are not nonprofit, who are very about the brand, I think a lot of nightlife is becoming about the brand, I wonder how that is involved with seeing people as, not just DJs, but as people. I have heard a lot on Instagram that DJs are becoming this type of brand and also working against the algorithm. This idea of pace is even in the production of your mixes and also the production of like what you're releasing. So I think in general, how do you feel that pace is being expanded both in the physical sense in the nightlife club, but also online with Bandcamp Fridays, and then also the pace of SoundCloud and Instagram, all these algorithms kind of like dictating what the production and image of nightlife is. And I think with Community Bread and Dweller is very interesting is the pace is dictated by the community. So it's just kind of like sitting with that, and talking about algorithms and how much we hate them.
Yeah, I definitely think that there's certain issues with the algorithms and how we consume music. But I think in more than just pace, it's like actually just creating space as well. Like who gets to have more of a say, who gets to have a voice in this is the big decisions, and it's not just like putting someone in a lineup as a sign of tokenism, or having someone working in a cloakroom, or or as the person at the front. It has to be installing these people into like positions of leadership roles, and they're the ones that get to curate the lineups. So I think there's something inherently broken with our system when the people that are making most of the money are like white cis straight men in Western Europe, and the ones that own the platforms and have the power. So I think what we're trying to do with Community Bread is reshape that, and we were able to curate, it's 6 live streams and over 60 artists, and everyone was paid evenly. And every single artist was like a queer or POC person. Like we've never had one cis straight man play, and that's not a direct of ours, but just there's so many amazing artists out there that we could highlight. So it doesn't really add up to us, why the people that are making all the money and the people that are making all the big decisions are, like I said, white cis straight men.
Yeah, I want to add to that. We're talking about pacing as in our community here in New York City. We've always been fast paced, and it's always been competitive. It's always been dog eat dog when it shouldn't have been. But what the pandemic had allowed us to do was connect with communities all over the world who focus on creating their own queer spaces, or their own environments, and carving out those events platforms for their own communities. Like, for example, there's a collective in Manila that reached out to us called Elephant, and we didn't know about them. There's no like directory online where you can find marginalized collectives around the world. They reached out to us and they said that they really love what we're doing. They asked if we can help because their oppressive dictatorship is killing their trans brothers and sisters. They asked if they could submit stuff to us, and we would stream a fundraiser for them. And so we did, and they submitted some of the most brilliant audio, visual, and performance sets that really captured their struggle. Actually, Angela, our other partner, she ran into one of the artists on the West Coast the other week, and she said that Isola, the artist, was able to come to the United States because of the funds that we were able to raise for Elephant, and now they're attending grad school.
Yeah, that's great.
So that is the power of pacing, especially in a digital sphere. It's all over the place, but it gives us the opportunity to connect with people we would never have before, and I think that's really important as we start to return, not just like to normalcy locally, but globally, is really, we need to hear the stories of people fighting on the other side of the planet, the music they're making, the initiatives they're doing to continue, to continue creating it, especially in political situations where it is not acceptable, or it is looked down upon, or it is even, punished. So those kinds of conversations and their histories are the pacing for the future.
Yeah, and I agree in terms of like the pacing of the future, and then also going back to what Ryan was talking about, and not to like jump in front of you, Ryan, or anything, this connection of memory and geography, in terms of techno and everything, it all came from the Midwest. Columbus is based in the Midwest. We have a different type of pacing and a different type of culture as well. So it's kind of interesting as we're having these conversations of where nightlife is kind of situated, this representation of nightlife is situated in terms of New York or LA, and that type of pacing is very, intense. And where we're situated, or even where different folks are situated in geography, like the South, or even in other American places where the pacing and also the oppressive structures are still happening. And I think it's where, going back to I think Ryan threw out the idea of care. How do we situate care in nightlife spaces? And I guess this could be like more of a conversation and how we jump off into this. In terms of like care in that, but also in care where we're remembering where this music is happening and how it happened, and how even with Verge, we didn't know that like this would be so, I guess, popping in a way that like a lot of people in Detroit and like a lot of people in Minneapolis and a lot of people in different Midwest cities are really coming to us and being like, wow, this is really needed, because it didn't seem like people were paying attention to anybody in the Midwest, when really like a lot of this music did situate itself from the Midwest. So, and also thinking about like other local initiatives. So I think it's really interesting too, like the connection between the local and global. And I think community bread is like beautiful in terms of like that connection. And I wonder, like, in our ways, like how are we forgetting and the care of like in our own like environment, that we're so close to one another, but we don't actually like we're not really paying attention because of like we're on to the next thing. So I don't know, I'm leaving that off, that trailing.
Amazing. I hope I can get all this out before I forget it. When you were talking about kind of geography and pacing, but also kind of widening this net away from New York, LA, Berlin, and what Arthur was saying, this kind of like, we have this moment where we've really been given the gift to kind of figure this thing out, right? We kind of maybe felt disheartened, or, wow, this structure is like way too big to even try to critique it or confront it, and kind of everything kind of stopping for however long. I think it's back up and running, but even that moment gave us kind of a quick, like, the veil fell for a second. I was like, oh wait, it doesn't have to look like this. And I think with Verge, it makes me think about how slowness can be like a decompression, where things don't need to be compressed, where all we have is New York, all we have is LA or Berlin, like I said, the past three. But now, when you were talking, Reggie, maybe think of like kind of like opening an aperture, like letting more light in. And like before, it was very, very tightly focused on like very, very small spaces, like spatially so, really, really compressed into very minute geographies. And when you do that, you also rid yourself of anything else that might inform those geographies, like, tons of the Midwest and where techno's coming from. And like Chicago House and New Orleans Bounce, like all of these different things can be forgotten if you're not seeing those things. But now this slowness has really incorporated, like, oh no, things like Verge, things like Community Bread, things like Dweller, where how we're planning like our future. We're working with someone in Ghana right now. We're working with someone here in New Orleans. Like, we're working obviously with Frankie in Brooklyn. It's just that expansion. The quickness of the algorithm really leads and lends itself and incentivizes compression, where we think like, oh, well, we can't do anything there, or this has to be in person. It's like, no. There's so many more options available to us. And I just think that that's a really beautiful thing, because now we are thinking more spatially. As much as digital as we are, we're also being much more slow about it. Kind of the slow digitization, I think, is really, really, I don't think I think we were headed towards like an acceleration, and now I think we still are with like certain corporations, but now we're mindful of like, oh, no. We can do something in that to slow it down internally for ourselves, even if, the Teslas of the world and the Bezos of the world are going to do what they're going to do. But I think it's been exciting and worthwhile and helpful and resource giving. Yeah.
I just gotta say, Ryan, all of you at Dweller have been doing such incredible work, because it boils down to communication and education. And the writing for Dweller is brilliant. Your initiatives, everything that you do is so important, and it's well received, and people need to hear that. And I think that even before the pandemic, right? Even though the digital sphere, like SoundCloud and even press, all of that stuff is oversaturated, or it's either oversaturated or run by certain certain stakeholders that control everything. But however, there are still opportunities and platforms that that exists where, you can vocalize and what is necessary and what is needed, or you can create it. And I think that's the beauty of the digital space. You either have it to be oversaturated or the ability to do what you want. And I really, really respect all of you for the work that you do at Dweller.
Well, thank you. That means the world. It's often all happening just, in our heads. So no idea other than, people coming out like Reg, like, oh, like I want to write something, which I hope everyone's read Technosonics and Black Expressionism. You absolutely knocked it out the park. It was so good. But yeah, Arthur, of course. I think it's just a matter of scale and knowing like, okay, we're not trying to be like a boiler room or like an RA. We're just trying to, again, like do what we think is helpful for the people that we actually know. And if people want to be like a part of it, then we'll get to know them too. It's not this idea of everyone as consumers. Like, no, these are people. And we're just going to email and, again, introduce a slowness to this. Wherever it goes, it's already worthwhile. The horizon's already right here.
Oh, that was so good. We always have these moments when like we're just doing our weekly meetings and we're like, we did all of this? Like we just did it. Like it just like went for it and it like worked. Yeah. And like obviously every project or just thing you start in your life, you view it as like getting to like the most popular version or like just crazy. But like we've just been doing it slowly and it's still going slowly and it's like still so rewarding and like unbelievable. It's better. Like I don't know. It just everything you're saying, Ryan, I was just like, oh my God, everyone feels that way. Like everyone needs to be proud of themselves. Like it's crazy.
It's interesting because we didn't get the when you're playing a set in a venue, right? You're getting the feedback from the audience. We didn't have that because we were in the middle of isolation, So I mean, of course, we get the attendance and the thank yous and stuff like that, but like the actual feeling of the life that we lived, we didn't get. So it wasn't until we came out of the pandemic and we collaborated with Fourth World to do that and to see all of the people come out and celebrate each other and celebrate life and what we have given and what we have lost. That was so incredible. And truly that's like what it's all for, to be able to come together and share stories and feel comfortable and to continue projecting that forward and elevating that.
Yeah, and I think that projection of forwardness comes to the realization that we're people, and that with even Verge, we thought it was going to be a very specific idea. And our only representation really was like NTS and like Boiler Room. And we're like, okay, we're going to try to like look for this demographic. But then at the end of the day, our demographic is so much more expansive. We have people doing podcasts, people doing art, conversations with other Indigenous artists, just like so many different ways people are like coming together in the form of audio, because even though we thought it was cool, quote unquote, cool to be like a boiler room, but that's not the point. Like Arthur, like you're saying, it's about like the people in the room, and those people push the history forward. I think as well as like people within these organizations and also people who want to like make music happen. It's like we are also people, and also we care for ourselves, and also finding people who also care. Like, how do I find a peer in radio, internet radio, who like would want to listen to us? We have sent multiple emails, we won't name names, to other people. And, people won't give us the time of day because, your social media, like who you know, if you don't know X, Y, and Z, or if you don't have like over 5,000 followers on your Instagram account, like that also does determine like certain access. And it's just like, I think that also like skews some of like the way like music can happen, and I think this is like a great panel and I'm getting excited, but I think in a way that this future forward thinking and also like kind of like pushing it to the moment, like this present moment, in the way that like, I guess with the live streaming, it's a great capability. I think like certain stakeholders are definitely utilizing that for their own gain and their own capital. And I don't know if like there's a way artists can like also negotiate that. I don't know if people from like Community Bread, you have like some ideas like how DJs or even artists or even radios can be like, oh no, like you can't just like capitalize off this like live stream without us like also getting money back too. I don't know if there's like the way people negotiate. I don't know. And also with Dweller, like the festival, like negotiating like their wages, like being played, you know, certain festivals are like, you're just being paid this versus like something else. So I'm going to wrap that up, that comment, but like that free for all like conversation.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting because it's a whole live streaming in lieu of the dance floor is, you know, quite a newish format for us to have to resort to. So, I mean, the possibilities are endless. You know, what we learned with Community Bread is that we can kind of create more equal leveling. We can create fair compensation for everyone. If you can do it digitally, and then we did it also with Same Release and Fourth World, we made sure that all our artists were all queer or POC artists, and we made sure everyone's paid the same, and we made better access for marginalized people that couldn't afford to go. So if you know, people start making those little changes, like the stakeholders in the industry right now, then slowly we can start chipping away at it. But you know, like what you were saying, there is some positives that came with the pandemic, which is, you know, we got a chance to take a pause and then really reflect and then also discover platforms like Dweller, Community Bread, or even just music in general, which we normally might just kind of scroll through. Like I was having a conversation with He Valencia, who's one of our artists that had played, and we were talking about like Arabrica and how I discovered it as a teenager growing up in Australia, buying the record and, you know, finding it because I loved Trance Mountain Derek May, but then finding it through a whole different lens and you know, and how I viewed techno. Then he discovered it, you know, in the Midwest, listening to it sped up like 160 BPM to like as a ghetto tech sound. So I don't know, I think globally, like we all kind of digest music in such different ways, but I think that to understand where it came from is something that we should know, but that people should be more aware of as well.
I think one of the great things about the pandemic that came about was that everyone's careers was leveled to zero. So there was no rankings, there's no status. So, you know, we can and then we can be candid, right? Because we are just stuck by ourselves in our rooms. So, you know, we had the conversations with Seth Troxler and his history about, you know, how, you know, it all starts on the dance floor, you know, with surrounded by queer, Black, Asian folks who are just there to, you know, just come together and really feel the freedom of the dance floor. So I think that if it wasn't for the pandemic, we wouldn't have these opportunities to just reflect and engage with people that normally, you know, would never give us the time of day, not because they don't want to, but because they just don't have it or they don't have access to that, you know. So that was one of the things that was really fascinating, and that engagement across the board, not because of your career, but because of what you think is important right now and how it has impacted your entire life.
I would say, you know, we haven't done much of live stream stuff. We've just been using HTML, just been words and some pictures. But what I will say is similar to what Arthur was saying, you know, when you are thinking about negotiations and kind of imagining when you are at like a full stop, there can be, I'm not saying there always is, but there can be a lot of strength applied in there too, where negotiations can look like whatever you want them to, because it's like, I got nothing to lose. So we're going to do this. And if you're not with it, then we don't need you. We can either do it ourselves or go find someone who's willing to do it with us the way that they agree. And if we believe that it's like, yeah, kind and like coming from a kind and nurturing space, then we're willing to fight for it. Again, when you don't have stakeholders behind you, you know, you can ask yourself the question, what can this look like? Right? Instead of someone else like, looks like this, you know? And we're just really thankful to have the not even the means, but just the possibility to see that through. Again, it doesn't look very big, but we're grateful for where we are now because it feels right.
Yeah, and even starting small, like the small live stream, you know, thank you all for like participating. Like we always take a chance and you may never know what will happen. And that grows. And you don't know what your decision will do down the line. And I think with certain stakeholders in nightlife, I think that my worry of the future, it's great to have like optimistic ideas. It's also good to be realistic just in terms of like the way they kind of will, I don't know, want to return to that pre-COVID like rush. And I don't know what kind of ways, even in like yourself or like even to your friends or your loved ones, or even the way like your organization works, like how do you slow down? Like we can go around and also say that, like, how do you slow down? Because I feel like if we all kind of like meditate or even like talk about that, even on this live stream, we can also maybe give that advice to like in the future when there's, or even in the present now when there's this urgency because we may shut down, we may not, or et cetera, et cetera. How do you think about like slowing down or caring for yourself that can also be applied to your day to day? And hopefully we can keep that in mind when we try to do something big or when we try to do something ambitious, which is like fine as well. I can go as well, like in terms of the way I slow down is naturally just to listen to nothing because I listen to music a lot. I'm also a DJ. So I think when I'm not listening to music or when I'm reading, I read a lot of different types of theory or like books in general and looking at art. I also work in an art museum, so where there's not really a lot of music. So it's a lot of sitting in space and looking at work, and you kind of like really digest and decompress. But that's me. So I don't know who else would want to join in on that.
I think I only ever got the chance to slow down during the pandemic, to be honest. Like before that and even now, like everything's just been full speed ahead just because that's the situation. So yeah, like during COVID, and we're still in COVID, I had a chance to, we built community bread. We got a chance to kind of reassess what was working, what didn't work in our scene, and what our personal experience, expertise, how we could, input into that. And like, what you're saying about, stakeholders, I think what COVID did was kind of reveal what's and all, like the systemic problems that were happening in the community. And to go back to the way it was, I think would be such a shame because we have the chance to kind of change that now. But I think it also involves like, everyone, has their wallet. So, where you put your money, whether it's in events or what music you purchase or what, apps you buy, that's also a lot of power as well. So if you see something that's not right, you then just, you spend your money somewhere else. There's also a lot of power in that as well.
Yeah, I think that, well, I was going to say listening, Rich, but also what Paul was saying, I think just general, I don't know, discernment, whether that is, where you decide to spend your money, but also, like where you want to be, who do you want to be around, who do you want to listen to, who do you want to talk with? Obviously, the algorithm does, like I said, incentivize that kind of acceleration. So definitely getting away from that might be good for however long. I'm on Twitter all the time, so I'm not above anyone, but I do think that it is worthwhile to, just feel yourself, feel yourself in your body, see what's around you and connect with those that make you feel good. So you're not feeling like you're pining for anything. I think that, I think ambition can be like a really kind of deadly thing. I'm not saying that we don't want like a better space, but this idea of like being ambitious where like you are kind of personifying the hustle is really, really not safe. And I think if you're more interested in just listening and connecting and just feeling it, then you end up slowing down without even thinking about it.
Yeah, I want to echo all of that. I think for me, slowing down has been, engaging with people, not about their work, but about their experiences and just sharing that or listening to that. It doesn't always have to be something that's transactional or a production of some sort. Like just simply feeling is so important. And that's all, we only had our feelings for the past, a year and a half, 2 years. So to talk about those, to actually like, to embrace that together is a way to slow down for me, especially since everything is so oversaturated and full throttle, which has also been its own struggle returning to, the scene here in New York City, and understanding that how I spend my time, before I used to go out every single night of the weekend, and even on weekdays, now it's intentional. Now it's, it's revolving around the conversations and the engagement rather than rather than simply just like, keep going.
Yeah, I mean, just to answer Reggie's question about taking care of myself, like, I'm still trying to figure out what self-care actually is, like, just like dividing like self-care and treating yourself. Like, I think that I have gotten that conflated a lot in my life, and a lot of people do. It's like, someone asked, like, oh, like, do some self-care, and I was like, oh, I like went out to dinner. Like, that's not the same as, like, it can be, but it's like not the same thing. And I don't want to turn this into a therapy discussion, but yeah, I think similar to what Ryan was talking about, like, I have been trying to slow down when I start getting, and what Arthur was saying, like, when I start getting like super ambitious, like, I need to make mixes for all these things. I need to be booked every week, blah, blah, blah. I need to do all this. Like, I got to like slow down and be like, okay, am I doing stuff, like, how do I word this? I heard someone say, like, are you doing things that the person you see yourself as would do, or just like doing things mindlessly? You know what I mean? Like, my ideal self rests a lot, but I don't actually rest that much. So like, I just try to like bring it back, and I'm like, no, my ideal self like is taking time to rest. So I have to like really think about whether I'm doing things intentionally or if it's just like me competing with myself. So yeah, that's how I'd answer. I didn't really answer that, but those are like the things going through my brain when I get caught up in like all of this ambition all the time.
Yeah, that's perfect, Nadia. I don't know. I think when we get that like urge, we're like, okay, let's take a break. We literally pick a random day, not even a random day. We just take a day that we don't air the radio, and we communicate that with everybody, because sometimes taking breaks is okay. And that's what you learn when you're a child, like, it's okay to take a break. And I think we should just also take pauses and breaks during the time. But yeah, as we're wrapping up here, we have less than 10 minutes. I kind of want to go around to like two questions, last two questions. One about how do you support your local scene, especially if it's like not a place that's super connected, like a very like spread out city, or like a different or smaller city. Like, how do you like thinking about the local, like how should people treat local initiatives? And then number two, what are you listening to? What is your favorite song right now? And that's the last two questions. So.
I'll go. Local, I try to go to the shows if I can. And try to get to know people. If you see someone who's kind of interested, just make people feel included, obviously not like in an over oppressive way. And then if you hear opportunities, you share them around. And if you have the means to, give directly, I think it is just a material concern of people and in the resources that they need. There's also things down here, things like, it's called like system.exe, which is like every week people who want to learn to be DJs, get on some Pioneers, we'll figure it out, stuff like that. Just thinking more outside of, let me give me your $15 and you'll come in. And then what I'm listening to, I just stumbled on like a bootleg Autechre mix from like '05, which is really cool. But before that, I will say, speaking of Drexia, Paul, I was listening to Abstract Thoughts. I think it's the second on the B side. And he just messes with like James Stinton. It's like a solo project. He just messes with like rhythmic vertigo. So crazy. And it's just all just synth. There's no percussion. I just love techno tracks that don't have drums, but they feel like there's thousands of them around you. It's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, so what was the question again? Just from the local scene, was it?
Yeah, like more of a local scene, like how, like, since we're local and we're like, okay, how do we like support a scene essentially? And then what are you listening to or your favorite songs?
Yeah, I think going off what I was saying, I think like interpersonal just relationships and all my best friends, you know, everyone that means the world to me, I met on the dance floor, whether it was in Australia or here or whatever. So there's something about that dance floor connection that, you know, it goes beyond that as well. So I think just building on that, and like you said, if you can support someone or support a collective or support a new night, and you have the means to do so, then do so. And then, like I said, you know, the power of change all exists within each of us. So we can, but so we can. I think it starts with like interpersonal relationships. And yeah, what I'm listening to, I don't know why I only just discovered him, but this DJ called Morin X in New York, who's incredible. So I've just been listening to the mix over and over again. So.
Nice. They have a honcho mix. That's so great. Sorry. Yeah, they're really.
That's the last thing I listened to, and just like re-experiencing that as we were in the woods was really incredible. So it's interesting that you brought that up. In terms of supporting the local scene, I think it's, you know, utilizing what we have built in the digital sphere and continue, you know, promoting that, showcasing that as a tool to elevate our local scene, you know, especially, you know, there are people who are, you know, just coming into the scene, and it can be really difficult, especially because, you know, everyone's on back pay and everyone's, you know, still waiting for those gigs that got canceled for a year and a half. So, you know, showcasing the more underrated or just underdog events, especially ones that, you know, focus, especially ones that have a representational lineup with some fierce names. And I really think that connecting, especially with DIY spaces and the people doing that, and reclaiming those spaces in a time where, you know, it's all big venues now, like we have elsewhere and stuff. So I think that in terms of support, like, and focusing on the people who are, you know, starting out or doing new things, but also institutions like Good Room, who is on the verge of shutting down and need money. And so, you know, supporting with my wallet, supporting with the tools that we have created or have access to, you know, because I could only give so much, right? But understanding that there's a need for spaces like this, and the spaces need your help, like that is, you know, the communal way of support.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, that's amazing. Again, thank you so much for this conversation. I think I've learned so much today that I just didn't have prior. And again, the rest of the live stream is for our fundraiser, Verge. Again, supporting the local, support Verge FM. We are so small. We're not even one yet. And also supporting the spaces in your cities, and also even Dweller and Community Bread. But, you know, stay tuned for more. There's more mixes. And yeah, if there's any more questions, y'all can follow Dweller on Instagram and Twitter, and also Community Bread on Instagram and also Twitter by searching that. Okay. I want to say thank y'all again. And if there's any other last comments, say them now before I leave the room. So
do it with others. Arthur said do it yourself, which is great, but also DIWL, do it with others. That's the way to do it.
That's true. No, I just want to say thank you. I just want to say thank you to Ryan, Reg, and Nadia, and of course Paul, for, you know, coming together for this conversation. I think these things need to happen more frequently, and I really appreciate the outreach and you know, including us in this. So thank you all.
Yes, of course. okay, I don't want to go over time, but like it would be so fun to have a space where like people can just like sit and talk about these things and hang out, like a social club for people who like, it's like club people, but it's not like, we're not raving. It's just like, let's sit down and chat. Like that would be so fun.
It's conceptualized.
Yeah, club for the
Club,
organizers.
social club.
Yeah, literally.
Social club.
Yeah, but let me know if you want to do that. I'm in New York too, so yeah, let me know if you want to link up. But anyways, thank you guys all so much. Like this was incredible, and I'm excited to see what other things we can collaborate on in the future.
Yeah.
Likewise.
Okay. See y'all.
Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Bye.